Welcome to the final installment of my 9-day bike trip series, exploring the small towns and agricultural scenery of southwestern Ontario. In this segment I ride my bike from Pinehurst Lake Conservation Area to Aldershot GO station in Burlington. My day began at 7:30 a.m. I'm glad to see that my patched inner tube from last night is still holding its air. This here is a white trillium, which is Ontario's official flower. Since last night was my final night of camping on this trip, I'm putting in some extra effort to clean and dry the tent before packing it away. I had everything packed up and was on the road by around 9:15. I exited the campground and rode northeast along Pinehurst Road. When I reached Glen Morris Rd, I made a right turn and headed east. The date today is Sunday, May 27, 2018, and today is the last day of a very enjoyable vacation. This bridge here is a crossing of the Grand River. I actually crossed this river heading in the opposite direction back on day 3 of my trip when I was in Dunnville near the mouth of the river on Lake Erie. Even 150 kilometers upstream of that spot, the river is still very wide here. When I got to East River Road, I turned right and headed southwest. The community I'm passing through here is called Glen Morris. I actually attended a wedding at this church back in 2012. Since leaving Niagara Falls on day 2 of my trip, this is actually the first point along my route where I'm passing through a place where I visited before. I rode along Dunbar Road, then exited the community along Glen Morris Rd East. On the right here is Onondaga Farms, which is a children's camp operated by the Tim Hortons Children's Foundation. The county I'm riding in now is the County of Brant. It's a single-tier municipality, which means that the county is not subdivided into smaller townships, it's simply governed as one single municipality. When I reached St. George Road, I took a right turn and headed south. I turned again when I got to McLean School Rd and continued riding east. The time is now around 10:30 a.m. and the temperature has risen to 24 degrees Celsius. The sky is mostly clear and there isn't a significant amount of wind today. When I reached Sagar Road, I made a right turn and briefly headed south before turning left and continuing east along Concession 4 West. I'm going to be on this same road for at least the next 24 kilometers. I've also now left the county of Brant and entered into the city of Hamilton. This area is part of the former municipality of Flamborough before it was amalgamated with Hamilton in 2001. These big greenhouses appear to be used for growing cucumbers. I've been seeing a lot of road cyclists riding along this road. Today is Sunday and this must be a common route for recreational cyclists. I still feel very much like I'm out riding in the country, even though I'm actually very close to the edge of the suburbs. However, when I reached Highway 6, I could tell that my beautiful country riding on this trip had now come to an end. I rode southeast on Highway 6, then made a left turn onto Parkside Drive, which took me in the northeast direction. I'm now approaching the community of Waterdown, which is part of the city of Hamilton and was part of the former municipality of Flamborough. I made a right turn when I got to Hamilton Street, then eventually turned left onto Dundas Street, which took me through Waterdown's historic downtown. I had been considering stopping here for lunch, but since I've got lots of leftover packaged foods, I'm planning on eating those on the GO train instead. I turned right when I got to Mill Street and headed in the southeast direction. After a short distance, this road changes names and becomes Waterdown Road, which takes me down a steep hill down the Niagara Escarpment. I climbed up the Niagara Escarpment in Thorold, Ontario, back on day 1 of my trip. While I was coming down the hill, I also crossed the municipal border, and I'm now in the city of Burlington. Coming down this hill, I could really sense a noticeable difference in the behavior of the drivers here in the suburbs compared to what I've become accustomed to riding in the country. Even though I was riding down the hill at a fairly reasonable pace, several vehicles tried to squeeze past me, even when there wasn't enough room to safely do so. After crossing Highway 403, I made a left turn and entered into the Aldershot GO station. There's convenient train service from here back to Toronto, which runs every 30 minutes. I tapped my Presto card and pushed my bike through the tunnel. When I got to the platform, I discovered I had just missed one of the trains by a few seconds. As expected, 30 minutes later, another train came along and I got on it. Thankfully, I'm not under any kind of time crunch today, and I hadn't been aiming to catch any train in particular. Of course, it would have been possible for me to have ridden my bike all the way back to Toronto without taking the train, but I really don't enjoy riding my bike in the suburbs nearly as much as I enjoy riding it in the country. On a trip like this, when I have a limited number of days to travel, the GO train has allowed me to maximize the type of riding that I enjoy most. The train ride from Aldershot to Union Station only takes about an hour and costs $10.66 with a Presto card. This bridge here is where the train crosses over the Humber River. The highway that we're riding along beside is the Gardiner Expressway. This train heading in the other direction is one of the Union Pearson Express trains, which will take you from downtown Toronto out to the airport in 25 minutes. The skyline of downtown Toronto is now coming into view. I arrived at Union Station at around 2:15 p.m. and pushed my bike through the station to street level. I then rode the 4-kilometer route back to my apartment in the annex. The city seems to be much the same as how I left it, although this building looks more demolished than it was in the clip I took on day 1 of the trip. After a very enjoyable trip, here I've arrived back at the parking garage of my apartment building where my trip began 9 days ago. The time is now about 2:45, and I'm once again back home in my concrete jungle. So including that last segment of riding in Toronto, I rode a total of 57 kilometers today, which is by far my shortest distance. When I tally up all of my daily distances from the trip, I get 898 kilometers, but let's just call it 900. I'm sure there was at least 2 kilometers along the way when I didn't have my GPS turned on. I also tallied up my expenses for the trip and concluded that I spent just under $700. My biggest expense was camping permits, which was closely followed by meals at restaurants. The remainder consisted of groceries, miscellaneous, which just ended up being sunscreen and an SD card for my camera, and finally GO train fares. For a 9-day vacation away from home, that's really not too bad. All in all, I had an absolute blast on this trip, and I can't wait to do another one. Ontario is a really great province with a lot of great scenery and interesting history. Getting to experience it from the seat of a bike is really one of the best ways to go. If you have some time off and you're looking for a way to spend your vacation, I strongly encourage you to consider doing a bicycle tour. If you live in Ontario, there are many great places to see. If you live elsewhere, I'm sure there are also many hidden treasures in your region which are just waiting to be explored. If you've got some people to join you on a trip, that's great, but if you don't, I would encourage you to consider doing a solo trip. I'm sure you'll find that there are lots of interesting people to interact with along the way. I really hope you've enjoyed joining me through to the end of this 9-part video series. As always, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching.